Well, thanks, y'all, for coming up. I see we have a little bit less than the previous technical debt talk, which I think for UX is probably about right. Probably right where we need to be. My name is Dean. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for coming to hear this. How many people came to my crisps and pickle talk? A few here? Okay, no pickles in this at all. And if you didn't go to that talk, boy, did you miss it. Okay, today it's the science, psychology, and secrets of stellar UI. My name is Dean. You can find me at Experience Dean, Twitter, Instagram. I am the principal in a company called True Matter. We're a UX consultancy in the United States, in sunny South Carolina. We specialize in complex, highly functional software sites, apps, and things like that, which means all day, every day, I get to do the thing I do and love the most, which is talk and interact with developers. So I go and I speak in conferences from a UX perspective to developers because you are the people I care about and love the most. So what I want to do today is take you on a little bit of a trip to the past that you should all be aware of, maybe, and we'll see where it takes us. So we're in a golden age, right? I mean, you don't have to be at a conference to know this. Golden age of tools, golden age of capabilities, of content, of information, everything. Anything we want is at our fingertips. When the internet was new, and this is, I'm an old person, and I had to figure out everything and learn to code all by myself before Google, before anything, before anyone was even into sharing stuff. We just had to figure it out. And now it's everywhere. Anything we want to learn, anything we want to do. But yesterday, it was like this. And I mean yesterday, living memory. It wasn't that long ago that mainframes and computers, they filled your room, big rooms, big knobs, big switches, amazing stuff. Everything that came before us had to be thought of from nothing. It had to be invented outright. Things that simply did not exist. Every line of code ever written, especially in the beginning, had to be conceived by someone. And this is all conceived by engineers. Engineers thought of and envisioned and built the world we live in today. Now, early on, engineers realized, hey, this is a new thing. We built this thing. It fits in a room, and we have to understand how people interact with it. How do people use this thing to do stuff? And so disciplines are created. HCI, human-computer interaction. This is where this comes from, mid-century. It evolves into something called human factors. Engineers have great names for things. And then usability engineering. All right, the term usability was originally stuck right on engineering. Engineers invented these disciplines. They thought up and conceived and tested and failed and tried how to sort out using these systems. That is your legacy. Now along comes the human-computer interface, the graphic interface, Xerox, Apple, all that. And something different happens. Now other people are starting to interact with these systems. These are people from the dreaded humanities. These are writers, creative people, people who don't know how to do what we do. And they now have something to say, and they had good things to say, and we're creating new ways to essentially create elements on the screen. Now, this all comes to a serious point with the web. No more can we separate at all. Now wholesale marketing people come crashing in through the door. My God. And now everyone's in the mix. It's no longer engineers only. And now we got to deal with everything else. And now nowadays you make things for free. And the web as a an entity is maturing and changing, and the lines are blurring, and it's all wonderful. And this is where we live today. Everything's mobile. Everything made possible by engineers. But I'm going to argue that we've actually lost something along the way. Because when these folks from the humanities barged in and started playing with our stuff, they took over certain aspects of what we do, didn't they? Because now developers aren't really taught about the origins of usability engineering or HCI or human factors. Your legacy is not taught. You're not taught what a great interface is or why it's important or how it should be used. There's too much else to learn, too much else to do, too much specialization. We've lost something along the way. And today, what I want to do is take us back a little bit, take us back to school a little bit, to remind each other about what it is that we can still reclaim, that we can still understand, we can still grasp everything that makes a UI great. It's important because we're working very, very hard at this, right? And I don't want you to waste your work. I don't want you to work for months and months on a beautiful thing that fails and crashes and burns because it's confusing and no one wants to use it. So we're going to go over a few things today that I'm determined to convince you of. First is that UI is measurable and scientific. I promise it is. UI rules apply across technology, no matter what you're working on, no matter what you've been working on, or what you will work on. The rules I'm about to tell you will apply to all. The same rules that applied for that big mainframe room, okay, are going to apply to voice, are certainly going to apply to holograms, whatever it is we'll be using, right? Okay, same thing. And UI is something that you can understand, and it's something that you can do. I promise I'm going to prove that today. And if I don't prove it, I don't know what you can do, because I'm a very weak person. So, okay, we're going to start. Have some fun. Dive back in. Just work with me on this. UI is not subjective, no matter what the creative people tell you. Okay, I know creative people. And we're going to talk a little bit about why they say what they say later. But they're wrong when they say it's subjective. Every good conference has at least one iceberg illustration. This is mine. If you haven't seen it yet, congratulations, we finally got to it. The experience is under the water. It's the big thought and planning that goes into making something work for people. The UI, what I'm really talking about today, is just the bit on top. And it's really important to know that because a mistaken notion that a lot of particularly young developers have these days is that what creative people do is the thing that comes later. We code it, we build it, we make it, we test it, and then someone comes along and makes it pretty, makes it beautiful. Now, forget about the fact that you'd never design anything that way, a car, anything. It's a mistaken notion. So the question is, how can you know that this ugly, horrible thing that you're giving is an ugly, horrible thing? Because you can't put a little bow on it and suddenly it's fine, right? That doesn't work. No matter what a creative person does to your stuff, if it's not usable, they can't help you. So that doesn't matter. Okay, this is ugly, correct? Am I right? Some people might like it. I get that, okay? In fact, the people who made it like it very much. Because they did it on purpose. Okay, this is an art school, so transgressive. Let's break things for no reason. And so they create this. I can tell you why, and by the end of today, you're going to learn a lot about why this is bad. It's not just that, it's hard to read, for one, and it's hard to know what to do. This is just a normal, everyday site. It's just a hospital site. There's nothing crazy about this. There's some good functionality in there, sure. But instantly we look at this and say, that appears to be easy to use. This does not. So we're going to explore why. There's a reason for this. It's not just that the designer was talented. The designer was talented, but it's not just because of that. Okay, now to unpack that, We're going to unpack a little bit about who we are as people. And it's important, we always talk about the user like there's some other thing. It's us as well. We're very limited people, and this has a direct effect on how we use stuff on a screen. Our eyesight, not so good. Okay, human eyesight is actually not that great when you compare it to eyesight of other creatures. We have this thing called peripheral vision. You can sense it right now. There's things over here. There's things over here. Problem is, you actually are not seeing any of it. You can see something right in front of your face. I told you this was going to front row. I am looking directly at you. You're in my line of vision. I can focus on you. Everything else is a blur. And in fact, my brain is filling in the stuff to the left and right. I actually can't see it. The fact that I sense it is my wonderful brain filling it in for me. So we don't see like a car like this. We see something a little more akin to that. Our brain fills in the detail. Our eyes can't do it. So let's imagine we're on a screen. We're just buying shoes. You can imagine this is something like what we'll see. We focus on only the thing we're looking at. Now that's really important for us to know because it tells us a lot about how to create things like really simple forms. I mean, super simple forms. Say you hit submit and you get a little error, which you might not even notice right away unless it blipped. That's kind of hard to see. It's not good error handling, by the way, because we kind of see something like this, right? We don't, because our peripheral vision is not great, we're focused on one area, we might not see other things. Our brain's just not good at it. So if we design something with a little bit better error handling, a little bit better notification, we've got a shot at it being noticed and people then moving through a system. And there's reasons why messages like this are very important, and their position even. We won't get into that today. We do a whole talk on forms and error handling. The position of these things is tested. It's important. So when UX people holler about it, hopefully if they know what they're talking about, you should listen. But I'm going to help you understand when the UX person or designer in your life doesn't know what they're talking about. And you need to be able to suss that out, as we say in the American South. Okay, our brains are not so good. Sorry. Arguably the most highly evolved entity on the planet, and our memory stinks. All right, our short-term memory is very, very bad. You might look at something like this, and what are there, 10 images here or so? They're pretty recognizable. But if I take this away, the best of us probably can't get them all, even though they're recognizable. And y'all are smart, okay? On the bell curve of smarts, you're way on the good side. And you're not going to be able to catch it all. It's because no matter how good you are, your brain just can't process it. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that in a minute. It's the reason why voice is the way it is. It's the reason why, excuse me, when you do a voice command, you do one thing at a time. Because you are processing words the same way you're processing images. You can't handle a lot of them. And you'll notice, I'll talk about it a little bit more about how these voice command prompts you get, how they're constructed to help you a little bit. Most of them are bad, but okay, let's get into some things. There's laws. They actually have names, and if something has a name and has the word law after it, it means it was heavily researched and proven scientifically, okay? So Miller's Law basically states that if you've got a lot of stuff, it's really hard to differentiate. I know, shocking, okay? But it's scientifically a proven thing. It's hard to remember all those dots and all those colors. You really can't do it. Even finding out what those symbols were, those logos were, it's probably even hard for you to remember a few of them now. But then you say to me, but Dean, a 3-year-old can say the alphabet. There's 26 characters in that. So I think you're wrong. But not really, okay? Because 3-year-olds learn the alphabet like this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Developers never sing this song with me. Okay. Now, when was the last time someone sang your interface? Never. And they never will unless it's an amazing game. Okay, this is an actual intranet that we once had the pleasure of redesigning. When you look at too much, and this is an exaggerated example, you can't factor out the important things. You just can't do it. There are very easy things to find here. They're staring you right in the face, and if you're a user who cares about them, and the usability tests prove this, you still can't find it. And I didn't even talk about the amazing drop-downs that are everywhere that can't help a person. This is the same thing, okay? This is reorganized and redone and redesigned. The first thing to notice is not just the simplicity. Simplicity doesn't solve everything, by the way. That's one of the things you got to be careful about. But in this case, it was important, okay? Now, we clarified, we made choices fewer. So let's talk about how that works for this screen. Because we have a lot of links on this screen still, right? I mean, it's organized a little bit better. If you look at this area in the middle, there's a lot of links. I can't process all these links. Do I have to read all this just to find out what I want? No. We simply do something really easy. We put it into 4 columns with a title across the top. Now you only have to read 4 things, if that. All right. All we want to do is get people to a simpler set of cognitive functions faster. All right. That's it. All right. And that makes sense to us as quantifiable people. Now, it also happens to look kind of nice. And the designer said, yes, 4 columns. All right. Okay. Sure. That does happen. But sometimes we say 4 is imposed on them and they have to figure it out. Okay, serial position effect. This is a good one. In any series that you have, the human brain is going to remember the first and the last most readily, straight up. Now, this is the reason why in any long list, you might remember the first because it's the first thing that got you, and the last one because it just happened. In a voice interface, when you go through a bunch of options, even just like 4 options, the 5th option is always, if you'd like us to repeat these options, because you can't remember any of them in the middle. And even if there's a few, you really smart people, right? And you still can't, because, just blame your brain a little bit. Now, there's a reason why we start organizing things the way we do. I'm not trying to make things fancy or put things where I want. I'm just trying to obey the serial position effect. I know how brains work, so I can assure you that the 2 most important options on this small global nav list are the first and the last. I know that's where everyone goes. I know from analytics and usability testing that it's found easily. But I got there first with the team because I just know the stuff in the middle, all right? Von Restorff. Okay, the von Restorff effect says, in a group of things, you remember and see the odd thing first, all right? So when you look at the screen, you probably instantly see the word drive because it's screaming at you. One thing our brains are very good at, thank goodness, is we're amazing pattern recognizers. We're very, very good at it. And that's probably what makes you all amazing programmers as well. It's also the reason why the hyperlink looks like this. One of the most successful usability innovations ever done is the hyperlink. It stands apart. It's von Restorff in action. It is electric blue, because everything was always going to be on gray, right? And it's underlined. This is special, and you see it first. Awesome. One of the greatest inventions of our time, interface-wise. Okay, one of the things you probably hear about a lot, and I've heard a lot in the conference, is sort of a cognitive overload for us. But let's think about cognitive overload for users. And it's really easy to overload users. All right, this is an American advertising site for DirecTV. It's an old site. The main thing to notice about this particular page is that it's really, really long and has a lot of stuff on it. Now, if you want someone to go through all this and to figure out what package works best back in the day when we did cable, you would have to really look closely at it, go scroll back up and down, look a lot, figure out maybe, I don't know which one is best for me. It's a long page. Now, there's so much work that went into making that a wonderfully organized table, right? But this is a terrible way to present it to a user because it just demands their time, attention, and thought way too much. Never, ever overestimate your users. Let's look at a password or maybe an old software code. Just looking at this, we have a hard time transposing it. If I told you just to write this down, you'd be looking up every few seconds. Wait, well, did I get it right? Right? It's really hard. Your brain has a hard time with this. But if I separate it, you will instantly do it faster and easier. If I visually adjust it, much faster, much easier. So if we separate items in a series like this, items in an interface, into digestible chunks, we make things easier on people, us too. This is an egregious example of I think this is GoToMeeting, or was GoToMeeting. All right, there's your meeting ID. It's just 9 characters, but I just want to throttle the designer that did this. This is better. Just put a couple of dashes in. Faster, quicker, easier. You can accept this and process it mentally in an instant. You're not even thinking about processing it just because I separated things like that. We have complexity, of course, in grids, which we use all the time. We are constantly developing grids. I do a talk just on grids. I do a workshop on grids, half a day. But in this case, there's lots of things happening here that lighten the cognitive load on people. Just a few. We're doing alternating rows. In this case, we're giving things a little bit of space, probably more space than would be comfortable in many apps, because sometimes users say more data, more data, more data. That's okay, no problem. In this case, that wasn't as important. We've got a left column that's highlighted as well. We've got a nice header row, okay? It's great, but when it scrolls, and you've probably done these things before. The problem with this is that you're forcing me to remember something. All right, you can't force a user, particularly a average everyday person, to remember anything, let alone what's at the top of a column. So there's lots of little tricks that you've probably done. And the reason why this works is because I now no longer have to remember something. All right, if I have to remember, if I have to do work, you are basically causing yourself damage before you even start. Okay. Now, a little bit more. How are we doing on time? We're great. Okay. UI is governed by rules, and rules are our friend. I understand rules. It's very hard to talk to a designer when they say, I'll know it when I see it. Which is, and they're right about that, by the way. They just have this intuitive way to understand when something's right that we probably don't have. So we have to think about the rules. So let's look at Fitts law, which you may have, math, no extra charge. All right. Proof that interfaces are governed by actual rules. This is a very simple calculation that says the time it takes to do something has a whole lot to do with how far away it is and how big it is. I know, shocking. Okay, but it's math, and you can prove it with math, and you can prove it with experimental evidence. So if I'm on a screen, I'm this little hand in the middle, the very easiest thing for me to get to is the big green thing that's close to me. All right, is this too complex for you? We can handle this, right? Okay. The hardest thing for me to do is to go to the little red thing that's far away. It takes me longer, and my accuracy is not so good. And because my accuracy is not so good, that adds time. And time is our enemy when it comes to use of our products. We don't want things to linger, right? Okay, that means if you're basing your point of reference at the middle of the screen, the big green button is the one we can get to. All right, again, shocking, I know. But there's really great stuff about this. Most OSs look basically like this. Excuse me. Now, There's a reason why everything's on the edges, okay? Because if you put something on the edge and you use your mouse to go get it, first of all, you don't have to do any fine motor control, just zip over to the edge. In fact, no matter how much you move, you get to the edge and you're still there, which basically means you've got an infinity involved here. So this is why stuff at the edge of an OS is the fastest, quickest way to get to anything. It requires the least accuracy, the least dexterity, the least time. There's a reason why it's there, right? And it's this principle. It's not just because we need the middle of the screen so you can put all your junk that someday you'll organize. Okay, Hick's law. I typically joke that this has to do with living in South Carolina and being required to wear shoes, but no. It's another equation. Very simple. I mean, sometimes scientists just have to prove what's obvious, and this is obvious. The time it takes for you to do something has everything to do with how many things there are you have to sort out. That's it. Okay? I know. Rocket science. All right? And there's a leveling off effect to it. Look at this menu. And again, you can know these things, right? We're not even looking at software right now, and we could know these principles. This is a fine menu. There's nothing wrong with it. It would just take us long to choose our pizza because we can a lot of options. If you had one thing in the middle that said, the pizza we make for you, that's it. Instant choice. Otherwise, takes time. And that's why software can be such a problem. This looks old. It ain't that old. Okay, this has been in service very recently. And we have tons of options. They're going to violate a few more rules that we're about to tell you. Too much to do, too much to look for, too much to think about. I should be trained to use this. That's my first thought. Train me and I can use it. And anytime we're being trained on an interface, that interface better be hardcore serious. Training's okay, but not for average everyday things. That we shouldn't require that. This is an interface that's obeying several of the rules, okay? The really big, important buttons, I mean, this is ridiculous, right? This is basically, you hand this to someone for a symptom checker at a physician's office. Everyone has to use it. Old, young, poor motor control, everything. So our big button, it's huge. You cannot miss the next button, and it's way down at the bottom. This is fast and very easy. It tests impeccably. There are very few options on the screen. I don't have to think much. And they're very big. Okay, for this purpose, it's fine. You would never design hardcore software like this where we need lots and lots of data. Just a different problem, different user. All right? It doesn't mean that radical simplicity is okay for everything, because it is not. In this case, yes. But even when things are crazy, we try to simplify them. Okay, doing fine. A little bit of grouping, and this is all going somewhere, I promise. There's a law of proximity. If you throw a bunch of stars on the screen, that's all you see is a bunch of stars. But if I instantly do something different with the same number of stars, again, our brains see patterns beautifully. I cannot unsee 3 rows here. Impossible. Your brain did it without you thinking about it. Now there's 2 sets of things. One's a little bigger. Now there's 3 columns. Fast, easy, powerful. We're very good at this. It's a reason why something like this was so hard to use and required training. First of all, there was little space and we have to put a zillion things in. It's got those problems. They tried so hard to do this proximity thing. Let's put boxes around it. I know this is very old, but it proves the point. Maybe boxes around these things or boxes around those. And after a while, someone said, the hell with it. Just add some more stuff. Now, a simple thing like separating out details about a thing versus actions is so simple and so straightforward, and this really helps the average person. I can't stress that enough. Y'all are superheroes. You have superhuman powers when it comes to understanding software. People just don't. Other people don't. Let's just use proof that we could just use text for this. When we associate things together, we assume they're connected. We assume they mean the same thing. All right, our brains are good at that. And here, this is like bad HTML, basically, lazy HTML, where we have equidistance between something above and something below. It drives me insane because this is what you want. This is actually, a designer would tell you, well, that's just good typography, right? And it is, but now I know what goes with what and what's grouped well. That's it. That's it. That's very simple, right? You can make very complex interfaces this way. Now, this is not a simple interface, but it's highly usable. I assure you it's been tested over and over again, and the users love it, and they're fast, efficient, and productive with it because it does exactly what they need, and it has, I'm not even showing you all the stuff that's on this screen, but if you care about these principles and you constantly bring them to users, no matter the complexity, you can make things easier to use. These laws are all in effect. Okay, a few more. Good, doing fine. Continuity. This is an interesting one because we don't see a bunch of circles. You see the shape. It's really important to know. And your brain assumes it goes on. It goes on up and it goes on down forever, maybe. I don't know. Yay, brain. Okay? It's really good. You see progression well. XX check. Because we're in the West, we read that way, left to right. We see that progression. Okay, great. That's why these status indicators, this is a very simple one, right? This is why status indicators like this make sense to people. Someone had to invent this. It didn't just pop out of the ether. Someone said, we've got a multi-step process. We have got to find a way to help people understand where they are and how long it is. And it sort of developed into these patterns that you see everywhere. But it just simply follows that notion of continuity. Your brain wants to see that progression, so you just give it what it wants. One of my favorites is closure, and it's the reason why mobile devices work so well. This is 4 triangles, but of course we see the square. It's an implied square. It doesn't really exist, or does it? Now, you have your phone, and as you scroll, you'll see a little hint of something usually below. Let's say social media, right? Something as innocent as that. Innocent, air quotes. Your brain knows, hey, I've seen things like this. There's a hint of another one. Therefore, I assume it's one more of those other things. It's about the same size, and I could go to it. This is why you give a phone to like a 2 or 3-year-old and they can start using it. I've given a phone to my 90-year-old aunt, and she had zero problem with this notion of scrolling through an interface, that there's more that she can't see. She didn't have to be told this. That's because our brain assumes there's more, especially if we can see a little bit. So this is a great match of how our brains work and how devices work. I assume this is another image. I assume there's more to see. Fantastic. Okay, a couple more before I get to the conclusion, leave some time for questions. All right, 28 boxes? Sure, but what if I cordon off a few? When I do that, I'm actually making a new thing, all right? My brain still sees a big array, but it sees something special over in the middle left, which is why login areas on banks, for instance, have evolved to all be a self-contained thing. Now, this makes sense to us. This is a component. This is a widget. This is an element. This is a thing. This is contained functionality that's brought forth in an interface, but it's sequestered into itself, and we can make a lot of these. And it also, and everywhere in an interface, but from the user's perspective, it's a little bit of functionality that's a special little island of a thing that I know I can do a thing with. And that's a powerful thing. Once we know that that's true, we can do it in lots of places. That's why that works. Okay, now, I know that UI is a little weird, and it's for people who are, in theory, creative, and maybe you're not connected with the UI as much as would be fun to be. But I'm going to give you an example of why you can do it and why it's important that you think this way. Rolling Stones, okay? Great group, wonderful musicians when these guys were young, a long, long time ago. Keith Richards young guy, he couldn't read music, okay? But he's responsible for the writing of most of the music of the early Stones and all that, right? He pioneers open G tuning on his guitar. He's basically a gifted musician. Like an artist, he didn't have to be told the rules. He intuited the rules and he made music. And to my knowledge, later in life, he learns how to read and write music properly, but he didn't know at first, yet he can still do this wonderful stuff. And music has this duality to it. The same duality exists with the stuff we do, the stuff we make. Now, music, I can be a savant. I can be a jazz musician and not need music and play beautifully and improvise and just know what sounds right. I could be born with perfect pitch. It could happen. Or I can be a person who doesn't have that skill set, who doesn't know intuitively, but can learn the rules, right? This is a language, right? So my son, he plays in orchestras, but he's not a jazz type musician. He's a technician musician. You give him anything, he will figure out how to play it and play it appropriately and follow the rules of the conductor and play beautiful music. But he approaches it completely from this quantifiable perspective. Music is like that. Interfaces are like that. You don't have to be an artist or a creative person to understand or to work in this realm at all, at all. UI is, excuse me, not a mystery. I've only scratched the surface of a few things you can learn about what makes UI great. Now, there's a reason why you should care, though. But before I get to that, a couple things that you might be interested in. If you want more of this sort of stuff, because there's a ton of it, and it's really fascinating stuff. These are quick ways to dive on into them. And they're kind of fun. Laws of UX, you hear a lot of that from what I talked about today. A couple of good books, particularly Designing with the Mind in Mind, really covers a lot of what we've talked about here today, and from a quantifiable perspective, right? Not some flighty artistic perspective. Although you should read The Design of Everyday Things, this is very standard stuff in the UX world and for designers. I demand that everyone in our company reads it because it gives you a flavor of what it means to care about experience, and you can be from any background. All right, but you all might like Designing with the Mind in Mind, a little more technical, a little more interesting that way. Okay, here's why you should care about all this stuff and why you should leave not thinking, hey, that was nice, that was cool. You should leave thinking, you know what? I'm gonna dig into this a little bit more. How many of you have ever had this thought? If only the designer, the content person, marketer, a stakeholder, or whatever, if only they knew the slightest scintilla of what it means to do what we do. If they could just scratch the surface of understanding what we go through to make something work, would they not be easier to talk to? They would. Would they not be someone you'd want to work with more? Yes. So we demand all of our people in our company who are not technical, they must read technical things. They must understand how things are built, because I don't want them talking to the developer and the developer like, if you make me talk to this person one more time, I swear, right? And we get that a lot. Now, that's very true for us because non-technical people, you start talking and it's gone, right? They can't grasp where you're going. It's okay. You just got to be patient with them. If they want to learn a little bit, you need to encourage them or they'll run away in fear. Now, the same thing, though, is true for us. It's true for you. All right? If you know a little bit about what makes interfaces tick, just a little, why they are the way they are, why they need to be the way they need to be, what motivates an experienced UI person to make the decisions they do. If you know those things, my goodness, you have just superpowered yourself, okay? I promise you'll be a better developer because of it. You'll be a better development team leader. You'd be a developer relations person, a better programmer, all of it, because you're thinking about more things and you're learning more broadly. You will definitely be a better teammate. People will fall over themselves to want to work with you if you know some of this stuff, because you will get huge respect from them. It's like if you know stuff about UI and UX and you're understanding someone else's world, it's like winning the acronym war at a round table at a conference. It's total respect from the other side, and you want that. And this is my favorite one, because you will get to call out the bad stuff, because there's plenty of people out there who, on the other side, creative people who don't know the rules like they should, but they're just so good at knowing things instantly that they get away with it. They'll just stare at something and it's not positioned right, and they're uncomfortable, and suddenly they put it somewhere else and like, and that's how they know. And it's often right, because they just have the ability to do this. But they're often wrong when they think this way about UI. And if you know rules like this, you definitely have one over on them. And you can say to them, this shouldn't be like this. And they'll say, well, I'm the creative person. And you'll say, no, you're disobeying the serial position effect. You're putting the important stuff in the middle. And they're going to be like, what did you say? You can do that stuff. Call them out. And I've been on the other side, so it's okay that you do this, right? Okay, and do it you can. So this has been me, Dean, and I'm open for questions for a while. How are we doing? Oh yeah, we got time for some questions or whatever. And I just really am honored that you listened. Thank you. Any questions at all? Oh, we got one. Yay. This question is not a plant. I didn't plant this.
Hi, thank you. That was very good. I've come across a few outside of my career interfaces that was seemingly baffling. Most notably, most recently, is every single Call of Duty interface is wildly noisy to me. And outside of that, veterinary interfaces. My other half works in a veterinary surgery, and they're littered with tabs and etc. Yeah. And I'm not convinced that it's always accidental or bad design, because there's users who use the software and are very thankful for when it's been designed intuitively, but that's not always the person that's purchasing the software or immediately being sold the interface.
That's right.
And I'm very much aware that potentially it's being shown to managers. And if you've shown a manager who doesn't necessarily use the software day in, day out, a ton of tabs, and it looks way more fully featured than a sort of minimalist interface that may be easier to navigate, but initially doesn't look as fully featured.
Yeah. And
I think that the reason I mentioned Call of Duty is I think perhaps that must be the only reason they make them so noisy, is to look like there's more content in there than there is. What's your opinion on that, and whether there's sort of a psychological, deliberate choice to litter interfaces with more stuff?
Okay, I can answer that in several hours. But first, I would say, my goodness, if some is good, more is better. That's the way most organizations tend to think. And that's not true in features. Things that do less better are more well received, I can tell you that. Sometimes interfaces are bad because people are lazy, or they want more features, or just trying to sell and move on. And those are things that are difficult to... It's way easier for you to get completely ingrained in this notion of UI than do that. Honestly, there's so much bad software interface out there. I think I said this the other time, I'll have a job as long as I want it. Because you take medical software, I believe was I think you're mentioning, that's egregiously bad and lives are at stake. Okay, but changing bad software, especially if it's widespread, is very hard. So if you think about something like Epic is a big company that does medical portals and things like that. It's like turning the Titanic around to change anything on it, and we'll be saddled with their bad interfaces for the next decade, probably. In terms of Call of Duty, it depends on the user, okay? So I presume that the target is young boys. We all play it, I realize. But more cacophony for younger tastes. And I wouldn't necessarily say that all interface decisions on games are right, but they've become right in many ways. So sometimes bad decisions can become right if enough people get used to them. That's basically it. So if you, a great example is the hamburger menu and mobile options. At first, it's like no one knew what it was. And it's still kind of weird and bizarre, but now, years later, everyone basically knows, oh, that's the menu thing. Right? It's become something that's a standard, and so now it is what it is. There's reasons why, and I hope I'm answering the question. Button placement. Get this one a lot. Do you put cancel on this side and OK on this side, or cancel on this side and OK on this side, and which one's right? The answer is neither, really, because it's what you're used to. And if you're used to one, changing to the other will drive you insane. And that's just the way it goes. You see people try and just change the phone they use. So standards change. They're targeted toward different types of people. Some users want, if we showed some users who need lots of data, that simple, crazy thing I showed you, they'd fire us on the spot. There's a way to bring more data, more density, easier, without doing all that tab nonsense. That's all lazy, I would say. That's lazy, that's old, that's not thinking, that's not having UX people involved. That's what that is. Or, more to your point, it is leadership who's like, we need to move on. I need to sell this. The investors will like it if we... and that crushes things more broadly than we can address in this venue, I think. How's that? Okay? All right? We got 2 more? How are we doing? Yeah, we can do it. We got 2 here.
Quick question. Does this work? Quick question. What's your take on from a user? Hello. Okay, quick question from a user interface perspective. What's your take on Windows' philosophy of having the title bar on the top of each window and the other one, the Apple one, of putting it at the top of the screen?
Yeah, I think it's what you're used to at some point. I would say it's correct to put things on the periphery based on the math we looked at, but it just depends on what you're used to. There's no real right or wrong in those situations. So when people have debates about the rightness or wrongness, it's really, like saying my sports ball team can beat your sports ball team.
Okay, I thought you were saying, though, there's a kind of science and it's measurable.
There is, but I would say both of those situations are obeying the rules well. They're just obeying them a little bit differently. I don't think that's subjective so much as a good solution that has a little bit of a different take. Now, I might not do things like put the shutdown under the start menu. That seems to me to be ill-advised, right?
Thank you. I was wondering, the rules are based on how your brain works, but what if the way your brain works changes? I can remember a situation where there was this website, you had to press a really big, flashy green button, and my dad, who was slightly less experienced with using computers, could see it clearly, and he pressed it. I couldn't see it. My brain filtered it out because it thought it was an ad.
Yes,
so
ad blindness,
the way my brain works changed because I was exposed to so many ads. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. You sort of witnessed your own evolution to understand what a thing is. It didn't make that thing good. But you might even say there's underscoring what you've said, an important reason for accessible interfaces. Not everyone sees color the same way. There's reasons why you can't use certain colors and certain combinations because a certain part of the population can't see it. So that's why, like we've been doing accessibility since before it was cool or people got sued. In America, that's a big thing. Because it's usability. So that's planning for how brains work. But how they evolve, yeah, you can get used to anything. It doesn't mean it's great. I don't know how else to say it. I'm glad we didn't get used to scrolling marquees. Yeah. I think I can get maybe one more. We got one more back there. Can we squeeze in one more question before I got to get out of here? Or we can talk out in the lobby too, so I don't.
Shall I quickly just?
Yeah. Let's go for it quick. Is that okay?
Yeah. So my quick question is, what if you feel perpetually out of step with a particular trend that's happening in the world of user interfaces? The one that I'm seizing upon right now is, in sort of apps on phones, you've got the 3 dots, like the ellipses, which suggests there's something else to see. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but it irritates me.
Me too.
To press those, because I don't know if I'm pressing on a particular dot in the 3, or if the tap target is big enough for my finger. I know that's a.
Oh, you're right about that. And the people who made Microsoft Teams really love the ellipsis too much. It's a nightmare of usability. So I'm inclined to agree with you. Maybe that becomes better, but.
Is it another one of those things that's become right over time?
I hope not, because it hides function. It breaks a lot of other rules. Let's put it that way. Yeah. It hides function. It makes me remember what something does. It's hard to find. It's hard to see, especially in Teams. Bad. Oh, bad. So bad.
Thank you.
I can answer more questions outside if that's all right. I'll just hang out there. I want to be sensitive to.
So it's coffee break now.
Oh, we're good. So I can just stay here. Oh, it's coffee break. I'm just going to stay right here. I'll answer whatever you want.